I'm your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here as always. Let's get into it quick today, because today's episode is a real treat. I enjoyed the heck out of this conversation, so very excited to share it with you. On the show today is comedian Mike Mercadal. Mike's a comic I met doing mostly storytelling shows in the New York City area, but he's also an amazing comedian and a very deep thinker. And we had a nice long chat, and I think I grew as a human talking to Mike. So let's and I hope you'll be able to appreciate this as well, because this is a quite exciting chat with Mike. So let's go to my conversation now with Mike Mercadal, and I'll talk to you afterwards.
The Beats by Dre or the super fancy audiophile people are using like DAC headphones and.
Have you ever listened to anything?
Are we recording?
Beats by Dre? Yeah, I just started.
No, you know what? I know I know the scam of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they actually use weights in there to make it feel heavy, so
right.
that it can, because the quality of parts are like lower quality.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like scam, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, because I listened. I when I was in Tokyo, I went to the famous Sony store, and I listened to some of them, and they don't sound that good compared to other headphones I listened to. Because I got a really nice pair of wireless Bluetooth headphones that like really bring the bass together.
Yeah.
And Beats, by comparison, they sound kind of tinny.
They're not good. They're just, it's all smoke and mirrors, man. That's all. The reason they cost so much is
because the Chronic sold a lot of albums.
No, yes, and also because they have to pay all of the basketball players who they sponsor to wear them, and they have to pay. Like, that's why they cost money, not because they're good, just because it's a brand. That's why Apple bought them. Exactly, because they bought the brand.
The brand has more value than the product does.
Of course,
it's like super inflated.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm glad I learned that lesson when I was younger.
I've never been. I'm not. My mom wasn't. We didn't grow up poor, but we grew up poor enough. You know what I mean? Like I never felt like we were poor, but looking back on it, we were for sure. Like multiple generations in one house. I'm Cuban, and so like it was in Miami. We were just, when my parents got divorced, my mom and me and my brother lived in like a room in my grandmother's house for a little while. Yeah. And we were broke, so I wore Payless sneakers forever. Like I just don't. I was never instilled in me that you buy a name brand anything. You just buy the one that works the best. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Do get the thing that's going to do the job, because even if you haven't heard of it, it'll probably be better.
Or I'll do my research, and like there's a subreddit called Buy It for Life. And they recommend like stuff that lasts forever. I had to buy a lot of, when I was working as a paramedic, I would have to buy boots all the time. And I was like, wow, I'm spending so much money on these goddamn boots. And I looked up like the best boots to buy, and I still do that. I still will look up like which one of these is going to last me the longest, cost benefit, all that stuff. Super like
Consumer Reports and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
that magazine, I read that a lot. I was like, oh, okay, I'll get that.
And also like, when I moved to New York to do comedy and all this stuff, all I wanted, I'm on a shoestring budget. You know, I set up my lifestyle so I don't have to make a lot of money. I pay ridiculously cheap rent, but I also live in Jamaica, Queens. Like I had to sacrifice that way. So even when I do groceries, it's like calories per dollar. Like, how do I get the most out of?
Yeah. I used to look at like how much things weighed. I was like, oh, if I eat that, I'll probably be full. And then not knowing like about calorie density and stuff like that. Like I would what I used to do when I was super broke is I would have like roast beef sandwiches for dinner. I would parse that out. Or a couple times I would have just a brick of cheese.
Oh yeah.
And
a brick of cheese.
All right, and I'll just eat this brick of cheese. And
I hope you got some fiber to wash that through, to help that along its way.
Oh, there were some rough times.
Yeah, there's some
literal rough times.
Literal rough.
Yeah.
Well, here's the tip for everybody listening.
Okay.
You buy big giant bags of rice. Those are really great, rice, and you can buy dry beans, but you can get the canned beans, and those will last you forever. And then eggs are a great source of protein. for the money, and then potatoes, and then you buy the bread that was not of the day, like the one day from the day before or whatever, and they usually sell them for like $1. You buy like 4 of those, 4 loaves, and just put them in the freezer, and those will like. You can make that shit work. Rice and beans and eggs, rice and beans is like a full meal, and it tastes good. And you
exactly, and it's hearty.
Yeah, and it's literally like pennies to make. It's great. I figure I almost get worried that I'm too much like I'm almost miserly. Like I'm like, no, I don't want to waste this money on this because I can eat beans at home, like no.
Right. Well, no, you kind of have to be, because I don't know, how long have you been in New York?
In May it was 3 years.
Yeah. And you've been on the live in Jamaica rice and bean system for most of the 3 years?
Well, when I first moved up here, I moved up with savings, and I stretched that budget. But then I got a pretty good job. I was a paramedic for a long time, and I have a medical
this is
background.
the interesting thing. I
don't know you guide me and what you want to talk about. Let's see if we'll land on something.
This is good. This is one of the things that I find fascinating about you, and from some of the things I've seen you do on stage, is that you worked as a paramedic.
Yeah. For six years, I was a paramedic in an emergency room. Yeah.
Good. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So you were actually, and where was this?
In Miami, Florida.
Okay, in Miami, Florida. And you grew up in Miami as well?
I was born and raised there, yeah.
Born and raised in Miami.
This is the first, like, literally, I just picked up everything and left Miami, where I'd lived my entire life, to, I guess I'm going to live in New York now. I hadn't seen the apartment. It was literally like my whole life in a U-Haul truck. And that's it.
Yeah.
Bye.
No, yeah, exactly. It's just that I feel so many of us have that moment where we just sort of like abandon our normal, comfortable lives, and then sort of become.
You seek the. I have a theory that it's called. I have a theory of there's the macro risk taker and the micro risk taker. You know what I mean? Like, the micro risk taker is the person who goes out and gets drunk every weekend, and those are the risks that they take. They're like, oh, I'm going to be hungover tomorrow at work.
Right.
Which is a risk that you take. Oh, I'm going to, it's like these are small little risks, but rarely will they make any kind of life-altering decisions on their own. They'll be forced into.
Right. You might have a bad day or feel uncomfortable for a while.
Yeah, like if you have sex without a condom, you get pregnant, then you're forced into a macro decision.
Yes.
But there's people, like, I consider myself, like, when I was working in like a web design firm doing client services and some, soft skills nonsense, and I got laid off. And I was like, you know what? It took me a while to figure this out, but I'm like, I'm going to take every opportunity. I'll say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And that's when I was a certified firefighter also in Miami, where I went to the civilian academy where you can get certified, like you would get certified to be a lifeguard or something.
Sure.
But they put you through the fire academy. And I did that, and I'm like, I want to do that. Like, every goal I set for myself, I always say that I haven't met it yet. You know what I mean? Like, it's never, I haven't done it. It's like, oh, I haven't had, not yet, but eventually I'll figure out a way to get there. And,
absolutely.
And then that's what ended up happening. Like, I just started pursuing that line of say yes, and then like, okay, I want to be a firefighter. What do I got to do next? It was right during the housing bubble crash. I picked the worst time to go into like a tax run employment. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then so then it was like during The Big Short. You see The Big Short?
I haven't seen it yet.
But it's literally all about like the Florida housing market. Like, one of the major points is the Florida housing market. And I was watching, I was like, yep, that's what fucked me out of being a firefighter. So I just kept going to school. Like, what makes me more hireable? And in that process, I started performing at an improv troupe that I ended up helping run for like 4 years. And then we started a theater, and then that went under, and then I started doing stand-up, and then I just kept saying yes. I got into doing background work, and then I got an agent because someone just said, send your stuff, and I was like, yeah, okay. You never say no, you know? And then at a certain point, the macro risk was, all right, either I can continue doing these fun little risks of saying yes to everything, or I can make a conscious move. And I just packed everything I owned in a U-Haul, and I was like, deuces, you know? And that's it. And when I moved up here, it was like an adjustment for sure. But
that you're blowing my mind already, and we're 5 minutes in.
yeah.
I dig this, man.
It's one of those things where like I don't know. It doesn't sound strange to me, like in the because I have a theory of the edit. Like the reason why people, I think one of the sources of a lot of people's like depression and self-esteem issues and stuff like that is because that whole concept of you're comparing your blooper reel to someone else's highlight reel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. No, absolutely. And like your fear of embarrassment versus someone else's triumph.
Right. Like you should never look at someone's Facebook and be like, oh man, they got it. That's entirely edited. That is.
No. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you watch Portlandia?
No.
They did a great sketch about that where Fred goes on a spontaneous trip to Italy with this girl, and it ends up, because of the time changes, they are just like asleep at odd times, and they end up having to fly back really quick. But and then he comes back into the house he has with Carrie, and he says, people on the internet aren't having as good a time as you think they are. And then Carrie Brownstein says the most genius line where she goes, oh, I guess people are just cropping out all the sadness.
That is entirely right.
And that's what everyone on the internet is doing, is trying to make themselves look a lot better than they are. Even people, and like, I get maybe show business types doing that, or people who are pursuing entertainment. You're trying to project a certain image, because I think I heard someone say, just kind of project what you want, and then that's what makes you attractive.
The secret. Yeah,
exactly. Like all that self-actualizing.
Of course, and there's a million names for it, but really what it is just putting yourself in want,
not the job you have, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like there's a million. It's all basically putting yourself in a positive mindset to embrace positive outcomes. Identify positive outcomes. You know what I mean? Like so many people are on the lookout for the worst. You know what I mean? That hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Hope for the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People forget that hope for the best part a lot. You know what I mean? Everyone's just like, oh, what's the worst side? Everyone's walking around so scared. So I have a theory that's you do a lot of storytelling, and I've found
that's kind of where that's where we met.
I've found that at the dump probably, or something like that. Some storytelling show. I know we met doing storytelling. Because you told a very funny story. I think it's part of the one-man show that you do.
Yes.
And it was great. And I didn't know that was a scene until I got here to New York. But I love that because I've always considered myself a storyteller, stand-up.
Right.
You know
exactly.
What I mean? My style is very storytelling. But that goes back to the whole editing thing, because think about like that's why we tell stories. Like as a species, I think. Like from the very first time you're telling like the mythology and legends and all that stuff. There was not a Cyclops that stopped that Odysseus tricked so that he could continue on his journey. You know, I mean, none of that's real.
Yeah.
But in the edit, it becomes real. So like that's where all these stories come from. So now like one of the reasons why people I feel, this is entirely me, I'm making generalized statements, but one of the reasons why I feel people are down a lot is because you forget that you're with you the whole time. And it's in your mind, like that time you didn't wipe your ass properly, and then you're walking around, that little sting or whatever that feeling is, that discomfort, you're the only one that feels it. And no one cares. Like when, you played music, right?
Yeah.
When you're on stage and you fuck up and you just kind of keep going, if you make a big deal about messing up, that's the only way they would have known. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Yeah, everybody has to take a shit and wipe their ass. And all of these things that make you feel less like, or grow, like, oh my God, I said the wrong thing or whatever. Odds are nobody gives a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, we can curse, right?
Oh, of course.
Oh, all right, cool. But odds are like nobody, it doesn't register on anyone else's radar bigger than a tiny blip, and then it's forgotten. But for you, like there's shit that I remember from 8th grade that I'll have a moment of like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all in the edit, like that's all, you know what I mean? Like your memories are just edited versions of your stories. Like edit the bad parts out. Don't forget them, but like don't include them in your summary of your life when it's really not that big a deal,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which and I think this sort of plays into the comedian's mind, is that those bad parts are often where the laughs are.
Exactly.
So having to dwell on and remember that, and I think no wonder there's so many comics that are just a little. including my
Yeah. Well, we all suffer from that "look at me" gene. Otherwise, we wouldn't get on stage. We'd write a journal. You know what I mean? Like we all suffer from some form of attention-seeking behavior. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are chasing some form of, and maybe even I can generalize this outside of the performer's mind, is that I think a lot of people, especially in the modern age, are seeking a form of control because they don't feel like they have much.
There is, you know what I mean?
So they're trying to find something that they can have control over.
You know the meme, the old economy Steve or whatever it is, like something about like.
No, I hadn't heard that.
There's this weird meme online that it's about. It's those dudes in their 50s that are telling everyone like, I flipped burgers to pay my way through college. And then it's like, yeah, when you went to college, you could afford to do that. So there's a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Or like when I was 30, I had a house, a wife, a house, and 2 kids. It's like, well, yeah,
you also
lived
didn't have student loan debt,
or you also lived in a time where you could afford to buy that house by being a janitor in a business. You know, like
right.
you didn't need a high level.
You might have also lived in
job.
Yeah, you might have also lived in a part of the country that's much more affordable.
Yeah.
Like you can buy I was looking this up. I was in Oklahoma City a couple weekends ago. You can rent like a 4-bedroom house for what a 1-bedroom in New York costs.
My best friend is in downtown Dallas, and he's paying what I pay in rent in Jamaica, Queens for a studio apartment. He has like a 2-bedroom apartment. Like he's got like a huge place, and in the downtown area. He was actually strangely enough, pretty close to where the shooting happened.
Oh, really?
He's okay. He's fine. But it was it was like he said that it was the afterwards. It was like a ghost town. He moved out there with a girl. Again, a macro risk taker. You know, like I tend to gravitate towards people who. I'm nice. You know me, man. I'm nice to everybody. I'm very like super chill with whoever. But I don't always let people in.
Sure.
Unless I feel like a kinship with them, where I would like my best friend. I have one best friend, and that's my brother. You know, that's like family.
Sure.
And then I have a lot of close friends that are not even a lot, like a selective group of close friends that. You know, I share with and all these things, but that doesn't mean I'm not friends with everybody. You know, I'm nice. But once figure out where someone's coming from, you know how to treat them. You know, like if someone's an asshole, you don't have to be mean to them, but you know how far you can go with them. You know where they lie.
Right.
You know? So I tend to gravitate towards people who are like-minded, like everyone else, and that macro risk. Those people who are not afraid to kind of take their life and drive, not just be a passenger in the car, but actually like steer it. And my best friend, man, we were performing together, and that's kind of how we became friends. He's like years younger than me. He's 8 years younger than me, but we have that. Not even in mind, like we're kind of different personalities, but we have this underlying drive, I guess, or some sort of like seeking of improvement, like better. We always want to be better.
Right.
Like our mantra is Bo Jackson. Have you ever seen the Bo Jackson documentary on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, it's called You Don't Know Bo, and it is one of my favorite sports documentaries because it just kind of shows you this. It's like it's told in almost like the mythology of Bo Jackson. Like you hear a story that someone like I saw him do a backflip standing in the water. You know, like you hear other people tell the story. You know what I mean? And it becomes even more mystical, he
becomes like a folk tale.
Yeah, he becomes like Paul Bunyan or something.
Yeah,
and that became something that my friend and I were like, whenever something good happens, we just Bo Jackson, and we just like that becomes like our I don't know what's not a mantra, but almost like our like battle cry. Like when we need some inspiration, or we're like, you know, like he moved to Dallas and he got this great job and he's starting this thing, and I was like, Bo Jackson, motherfucker. And he's like, hell yeah, and you know, and that became our thing because it's like about finding that improvement, not just good but better, and that to me is also kind of a successful comedian mindset.
Yes, exactly.
Even if you think you're shit, you want your comedy to always be getting better.
Right. You want the jokes to be better. You want a good 10 minutes, and then you want to be able to do solid half an hour, and then You want to get late
Yeah.
night, or you want to be able to headline.
Growth is
Exactly.
growth, and that I think falls by the way. That New York, I forgot who I was talking to this about. I think well, I do a podcast with Mike Guild called Meeting of the Mics, and
Yes.
and we were talking about it with Noah Garden
Schwartz?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was talking about how, like, in New York, you come here to get better because you're only work out. You're only going to get stronger if you work out with people stronger than you.
Yeah, that's why I came here.
Yeah, and that's entirely why I came here.
Yeah, because I started in, and I don't know what's like. So you started in Miami.
I did. I started with improv, and then I moved to stand.
And then with stand up, and I'm kind of I want to get the timeline here, but just before we, real quick to
Put a pin.
put a pin in this point, I was kind of the same way. I'd been doing stand up for like 2.5 years, and I don't want to say I wasn't dominating Baltimore, but I was like having good sets opening for like the local headliners.
Of course, yeah, the
And
local scene.
And I was
Success.
Exactly. I was just somewhat of a known name, but I was like, I can't. I started to think I don't want to become the big fish in a small pond, because
Yeah.
I was also doing very like subtle, like at the time very dry, and that was not what the dominant style in Baltimore was at the time. When I started, there was barely even a comedy scene
Yeah.
in Baltimore, so I started thinking. So I thought I mean, a lot of people say don't move to New York until you are I
Or
guess
ready or whatever. Yeah, that's not true.
But what does ready
Ready
even
means
mean?
nothing. Yeah, ready means nothing.
Because you could, because I think people who are road comics who have been touring for a long time and then try to move to New York, they sometimes seem like they even have a harder time. Granted, there are some people that can get in quickly into like clubs or whatever, but the adjustment from doing the longer road sets and then what works on the road might not work in New York. But
it happens to the individual.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's like saying, you know, like it's like saying, oh, it's your fingerprint. You know what I mean? Like, everyone responds to stress and stimuli differently. So,
yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
Well, just to I'm in line with your mode of thinking, because at 2.5 years, I was like, I want to get better, so I want to do sets.
Right.
So I was like, if I move to New York, I'll be able to do a lot of sets.
Yeah, you want stage time. That was one thing that my buddy Will, he was on this, right? Will Watkins?
Yes, he was.
He
Did you guys know each other in Miami?
We did. He was like the house MC. Like, he worked for the improvs there. He was what we all aspired to do. He was working every weekend, basically, you know. And he was working for the club. And he, you know, he'll tell you himself, it was very kind of draining of the creative process to be on the business side of things. And then he would get kind of pigeonholed being this guy, and he was kind of stuck. So he was what you were saying, big fish, small pond. Mm-hmm. And I knew him down there, and I forgot what my point was. But he was he was
the guy that everyone wanted to be.
Down there, there was only one open mic a month at the club. Mm-hmm. Only one a month, which we were like, yeah, that's the way it worked. It was a 10-person bringer, and you had to do it. That was the only stage time you got. And then you had to search out and create your own other opportunities, especially in Miami. West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale had a little bit more opportunity, but that's like me going to Long Island, like going to Governor's. Right. To do open mics.
Yeah, so it's like about an hour away.
Yeah. It's basically like you're super limited in your stage time. So he would say, you know, or I don't know where he got the quote from, but I remember hearing it from him first, was comedy stage time is like air. Remember to breathe more than once a month. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You gotta breathe. And that was a huge kind of thing when I moved up here. But then to a certain extent, you can hyperventilate.
I know, yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Like,
you can do too many mics where you're just not really growing. You're just kind of spitting the same words out. You're not feeling it. It's like you become tired of your own material before it ever gets a chance to really become good material.
Yeah, and you just end up with a bunch of like half-formed ideas.
And a lot of New York comics suffer. Yeah.
No, for every person like I don't know, like Suba Agarwal, who
she's very, very driven.
She's someone who I think can do like 30 mics a week, and that's probably selling her shirt. It's probably closer to 45.
Well, she also that's her writing
yeah,
style. Is
exactly, and she can tweak that over the course of a night if you're doing like four
Exactly, yeah.
or five mics. I got to a point where I was like, okay, if I do two a night, if two a night is good, or sometimes I could even do one. But if I do like three or four, I'm out till like 2 a.m. every single night, I'm gonna fucking shoot myself in the head.
Yeah. And that it comes in waves. You know what I mean? Like there's certain.
You get spurts of like, oh, I have all these new ideas, and then you have spurts of like, I'm the worst. Why I can't?
Or
I'm
you're
not
just dry.
creative.
You're like, why am I going to these mics when I haven't written anything new? What am I going to do? So then you start and this is what I was going to say. A lot of New York comics suffer from the fact that they don't live lives worth talking about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you're
living a life worth commenting on, I think Pete Holmes.
Is that what he's? Is that
I heard
his thing?
I heard him say that because he would go. He goes through that. He'll be doing a bunch of sets, but then sometimes he doesn't need to go out every single night and do like multiple sets.
He's also Pete Holmes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's already at a different level than a lot of these New York comics, than a lot of us. I'm saying us. You know, like we are all New York.
No, yeah, we're all
open mic scene.
Yeah, we're all all just kind of grinding it out
and taking every opportunity. This is like where it's. And again, I don't feel like there's a large. I don't really feel competitive with a lot of people. I would love to get the spots that some other people are getting, but I don't feel like we're competing for the same thing because I like to think that what I do is mine, and I like to write jokes that I don't think anybody else could do.
And I think you do because again, you have for knowing what I know of you,
sure, yeah,
and knowing kind of like this life you've led and the stuff you're into.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's gonna like try to kind of ape your style. You're not an archetype. Because I think in comedy there's like certain archetypes.
Yeah.
I think you're you.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment and a real kind of badge of honor in the sense that people can identify that it's hard. It would be very hard for someone to do my paramedic material.
Exactly. Can we talk a little bit? I really am curious about your time as a paramedic. Because also I think this sort of driven mentality of yours is really like lighting my brain up. I dig it. I'm curious, like where this might. Let's talk a bit. And then I might jump around a bit.
Sure.
Your time as a paramedic. So you're a paramedic in Miami for 6 years.
I was a certified paramedic. I'd gotten certified, and then I got a job. I did all my training on the ambulance. Mm-hmm. And in Miami, the fire service and the ambulances are together, like literally in the same houses. Not like FDNY has separate EMS and fire stations, I guess you would call them.
But is every paramedic a firefighter, and is every firefighter a paramedic?
Not
or they just
always.
Kind of work together.
It became that because when they started, like paramedic is actually a pretty new idea. Like if you look back in the day, you know, when you see an old like the Ghostbuster Ecto 1 is an ambulance.
Yeah.
There's no work that can be done in the back of Ecto 1. It's too small because there was nothing. They were just ambulance drivers. They wouldn't do any kind of medical interventions. They would go, pick you up, and
get
drop
you to
off.
the hospital.
And that's it. Emergency medical services didn't really come into its own until like 1985. And then that became the EMT, emergency medical technician.
Yeah.
It kind of became a thing. And then the fire service started incorporating that because then also you get more money. You know what I mean? Like you can charge for these things. And it was kind of like the Wild West, you know? And that was back when you show up at a hospital, if you didn't have insurance, they would send you away. They'd be like, well, here's a quarter for the bus and go to the state hospital. If you went to a private, you know what I mean? And then there's laws against that. So like the EMTALA laws are where anybody seeking medical attention has to be seen by a doctor. So as an ambulance paramedic, it's all based on evidence-based practices. The more evidence you get, the more we learn how to do out there, the more stuff we get certified to do out there. And so like, you know, I've intubated people and you do IVs and drilled into bones to do IVs in the bone, like crazy shit like that in the field, you know, and we're trained how to do that. And a lot of people don't still think of us as ambulance drivers, which is kind of a weird, I say us, I'm not really on it, you know, doing that anymore, but that like forever, that will always be a part of my brain.
Oh,
it really does trigger.
Absolutely. Because I remember one of the first times I think we ever talked, and I won't say his name because I haven't seen him in a while, but this guy, that guy I know, we were standing outside the creek talking. This guy came up to us, and you were saying that your paramedic instincts kicked in and you thought maybe he might like be in trouble or like.
Oh,
do you remember this?
Kinda. Do you want to say it off mic? Who?
I can tell you about it.
Okay.
Again, off mic, but.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, no. So you have.
But it does.
You're able to like, if you can kind of like read a situation of if
Sure.
someone needs like, because I do not know anything about Miami, but is like drugs a problem in Miami?
Is drugs a problem?
I know I've seen Cocaine Cowboys 1 and 2.
Is drugs a problem?
What were you? So
I
you're
wouldn't say it's a
encountering
problem. I'd say they're very depends
idiot.
on the person.
What were some of the more common things that you were encountering? Because obviously you have to have training to like stabilize someone.
Yeah, sure.
So they don't die before you get to the hospital.
I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of misconceptions about what we do, especially what we deal with. 80% of what the calls you go on are bullshit. Like nothing, like non-emergency medical situation. Well, some of them is just like, some guy's passed out in this parking lot of a Denny's, and then you go and it's this homeless dude and you wake him up, and then there's like everybody covers a certain area. Each station covers a certain area, so we would go, and as a trainee, oh man, yeah, they put you there like go get him, and then I'm there, I'm like doing checking vitals, and this guy, he's just drunk, druggy, and he wakes up, he's like, get the fuck off me, and then they're like, who's this new motherfucker? And it was like. It was like a regular, frequent flyer for them.
Right.
Was this guy who's just like the neighborhood junkie, and you see that. So like, there's a lot of that where it's just the same shit. It happens every day, and then you have to be ready for when the one real thing happens. Like a car accident where we had to cut somebody out. Like that doesn't happen every day, but when it does, you better know your shit. Even stuff like when someone goes into full cardiac arrest. Like you find somebody dead, that is not the common call, but you have to know. Like that's why there's a lot of training. And then like once I finished my training, I ended up getting a job in the ER, and that became a different world where we were in the ER and we were receiving people. So the paramedics on the ambulance would drop us off, and I was like a Swiss Army knife of technique of the skills that we use on the field. Sure. I would do in the ER, so free up the nurses and stuff like that. But I got to work with the doctors and the nurses, and looking back on it now, because I've worked in other medical establishments, I was very lucky to work where I did because there was really good people, and we were doing crazy shit. Like I got to do stem cells procedures for somebody's eye. Like I got a chance to. I can't tell you how many people I've brought back to life through compressions. My part of it was assisting to revive somebody who was dead. I held some guy's head while the doctor was drilling into their skull to relieve crazy shit that it's just it's part of the deal, and you just gotta to react. The one luxury we had was that it was a controlled environment. On the ambulance, my uncle was a captain in City Miami Fire Department for a long time, for 30 years. And he'll tell you stories about like, oh yeah, I had to give birth. Some lady was giving birth in a crack house. Crackhead giving birth in a crack house. And I'm like, you delivered the baby there? And he's like, yeah, well, where else would we deliver the baby? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And people, there's like, I try to joke about stuff like I tell a lot of paramedic things, but like the funny stuff, because the bad stuff is worse than whatever you're imagining. Like it's whatever you're thinking of right now, bullshit. Nothing. You can't even come close unless you've had that some of those experiences. So it's like a weird balancing act of light and fun. And good times and stuff like that, but then also like just horrible, horrific bullshit.
Exactly.
And then your brain has to snap between the two worlds, and that I think is what
because if you live in because if you live in the darkness, of like whatever the most like I don't know faces melted or whatever the most fucked up thing that you've seen. If you kind of live in that, then
most of it is elder. Like if I ever had enough money. Like to be a charitable face, the face of some sort of charitable organization, it would be to stop elderly abuse. Because that is one of the most fucked up things that it would fill me with so much rage because that like this is your fucking mom. You know what I mean? Like this is your fucking grandmother. This is your someone who lived a life, even more so than child abuse, I think, because both are horrific things, but especially someone who's lived a life
There's an extra layer of
there's like a weird, and it would enrage me. And then you'd see people like and granted, not everybody knows how to take care of an elderly person. Not everybody can financially, and it really is a problem for when medical insurance determines whatever. I get on a soapbox about it, but but it's a really hard thing to kind of respond to, and that's why like. One of the stories I tell is about a little old lady that I met, that was super interesting and super fun. And she's passed away since then, and the end of that story is pretty sad, but all the cool shit about her, I feel like if I tell that story, and again, you can't name names and all that stuff, but if you tell the story, she kind of lives on a little bit in that, and the story has a lot of context about like, this person was us once,
Yes.
Like old people had to be your age to get to the age they are now.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
old person,
nobody thinks that in this culture that values youth.
Any old person is more interesting than you and your fucking bullshit. Your Brooklyn independent graphic art, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Like any older person who is not a piece of shit, because there's everybody.
Oh yeah,
there's pieces of shit all the time. But any older person who's willing to be a communicative and talk, like tell a story. Old people love to tell stories. They will, any story you have, you're like, oh my God, I got stuck on the train that one time. And this other guy's like, then some guys will be like, yeah, I got stuck in Nam. You're like, whoa, okay. Yeah, that's worse. That's really, really more dynamic a story.
Oh no, believe me. And I have a similar story on that vein. My first job I ever had, I was working at a garden shop in Maryland. And my manager, Vietnam vet, Civil War reenactor.
Holy shit, those guys are nuts.
Oh no, he would tell me these, and I'm just gonna assume that this is true because there's no reason for.
Was he the North or the South?
I think he was the South.
Yes, those guys are the best.
Guys. So he's telling me that he told me the story about the time he killed a guy in Nam.
Yeah.
Just walking out. Like, I guess he was like hidden with a shotgun. This guy was just kind of walking through the jungle, and he just kind of steps out and just shoots the guy, and he falls apart like a crash test dummy. Just limbs and arms going everywhere. And I was like, okay, I was never gonna be late, but I'll make sure not to be.
Yeah. So you guys want to order lunch, or like he's just
no. Those dudes, it's like I feel like I could if I could glom some aspect of their character integrity, I could be a better person.
And it's tricky because you can't just assume that all old people are sweet little old. Nah, man. There's plenty of old people. There's plenty of assholes. Like the same way there's plenty of young assholes. There's plenty of old assholes.
Oh yeah.
But they will still be more interesting than a young asshole. You know what I mean?
Most assuredly.
Yeah, and then so like,
because there's stories behind their assholish behavior.
So I guess, look, I'll be honest with you. One of the main things about me is I love stories. Like that's one of the things when someone asks me like, what kind of movies do you love? Like, what's your favorite movie? And I'm like, a story that's something that's a good story, and or like what do you like to read? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's a good story. Like
is it an engaging story? Does it make you curious?
Who are my friends? I feel like the people who I have around me are good communicators, and I think that even if you're like, here's another thing. When I first moved up here, I was in a relationship, and I became engaged, and that ended because New York was not her cup of tea, or
right.
she just couldn't handle New York. I say that it really was just that the person she didn't want to be here.
No.
And then in that process, you kind of reveal like a lot of the problems that came up were all communication. It's 100% true. Communication is like the key. But in every relationship, every interaction you have with people, like when someone has trouble getting a point across, I'm like, tell me the story of the point you're trying to get across.
Yeah.
Add some context. Like, don't just say a thing. Give me the story of the thing. And then it usually helps people kind of formulate in their mind what they want to say. I was never a good writer. Well, I can't say. I mean, I've been publishing stuff like for short stories that I wrote later on. But I learned that it was just to tell the story of something, and that was it. And then so like when someone asked me when I get up on stage and I'm doing a paramedic story for the funny, you can't lose the story, otherwise you lose the people. The punchlines are part of the story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's all
absolutely.
kind of one thing. I'm a terrible joke writer. I'll say that. I can't write the setup punchline joke.
Right.
I have to tell the story. My jokes are in my stories.
Yeah. Well, no, and I'm finding more so, and I'm very interested to kind of see this, because I find this like jokes are great, and they definitely serve a purpose. But I think the story that is joke dense, or the story that is funny, I think has greater longevity than being able to write a bunch of jokes, because you'll laugh, and then you'll also have some sort of an emotional connection to it. That's where I've been moving, especially since I started doing when I started doing Jake's show.
Yeah.
I'm
the dump at the Creek in the Cave.
Yes,
tons of fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna have him on this week
for sure. He's shooting his I think the second episode of the video version, the YouTube version of the dump, where he takes a story. Have you seen? You know what he's doing?
I saw the first one. Yeah, he's doing some really great stuff.
Yeah, really fun.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Mike. Can you tell me some of like the stories that are that have like really resonated with you? Like, it doesn't have to be comedy.
In terms of paramedic.
I'm curious.
Just in general?
In general, I'm curious what kind of story resonates with you. Maybe what. Because there's got to be a moment that triggers this sort of driven nature in you to. First, what made you think you wanted to be a paramedic too?
Well, here's the thing. I went through I didn't discover this until like my mid 20s to late 20s. Mm-hmm. I'm 35 now, for anybody listening. So I languished after high school. I played football in high school, and I was an athlete, and I was I thought I was going to the NFL. And then it was all kind
Where
of...
did you go to school?
I went to a really small private school called Miami Christian.
Okay.
And it was garbage. It was a money laundering scheme. My words, I don't have any evidence. But it's basically like, it was just super limited in resources. And like my football team had 20 people on it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not... I played Iron Man. I had to play offense and defense and special teams, because there was just not enough people. And I was one of the only big guys. But I loved football. That was a big part of my high school, big part of my life. Mm-hmm. I loved music. I wanted to play guitar. I've always been driven to be the guy. I don't know. I guess the fear of missing out is a big thing now. I've had that since I was 10. Yeah. Since I was a kid. Got an older brother. I was the youngest of I was the baby. And then I always
just you and your brother. That's your only sibling.
And then my dad got remarried, and I have two half brothers that are younger than me. It's like 10 years apart from my brother and I, so it's like a sequel,
Right.
Before boys, it's just brothers. Yeah. And I guess it comes from being the little brother. You just want to be a part of whatever's going on. And I always loved I always wanted to be around the adults and stuff, because I always found that very interesting. And I was in the honors programs as a kid, and I think one of the only reasons people thought I was smart is because I would ask a lot of questions. I would always want to be involved in things. And then I picked, and then after high school, going to that school really kind of messed up I became a terrible I didn't know how to study. When you learn all the things to make you a student, like high school is not about learning all the shit there. It's about learning how to learn all the shit there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Developing your study habits. That's what I feel high school should be about, but that's not what this was. No. It was just like, hanging, trying to be cool and play football and just be involved in everything. I was involved in like a million different clubs, and just because I didn't want to do school, I was like this. I didn't want to be a part of it was a lot of Bible shit, a lot of Bible thumping.
Oh yeah.
And that's when I started discovering the where my agnosticism lies and where my atheism came from, and I'm like,
sort of as a result of them shoving it down your throat.
Exactly. I come from church family, very, very churchy family. And then I think a lot of me learning things now, like finding all of this stuff out now, was when I reached a point of like, oh man, they lied to me for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why I'm a history buff, because the more history you learn, the more truth you learn, the more you uncover, even if it's like the history books are written by the winners, not the losers. You know what I mean? Yeah. So even if you're reading the winner's history, that's still a piece of history. And then if you figure out the loser's history, then that broadens this picture. So I've always, I got really into science. I got really into, learning, what's true. And, and that came later. But up until then, like, after high school, I was like, I didn't have anything to keep me going. I was super depressed. I was unemployed. I hated college. College where suddenly I had to do shit on my own, where no one was forcing me to do anything.
Yeah.
I terrible. I couldn't handle it. And it wasn't until
it sounds like this odd mix of control and freedom that you don't know what to do with.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I totally, like when they tell you can do anything. I changed my major 3 times. I wanted to go to school for computers. I'm a huge nerd, so I was like, computers, I'll do computers. And I'm like, I don't like programming. I don't want to do it. And then I just started, and then I went into like mass media and writing, and then that's when I found the whole kind of, I knew, I was like, suddenly I was like, oh, you know what? Let me do this thing. And I started working, and that kind of took over. I dropped out of school, and I just was like, let me work.
Yeah.
Make money. I always wanted to move out of my parents' house, which is anti-Cuban. That's the opposite of what like the Latino community, where you move out of your parents' house to your wife's parents' house. And and I was always like, because I love movies and stuff, I love stories, because I always thought, well, you're 18, you leave the house. That's American.
No, exactly. That's the story.
That's the story. That's the part of the deal.
Strike out on your own.
Yeah, and then so I when I couldn't do that, I really got I got real. I used to be like 300 pounds, 300 plus 325 pounds. I lost like 100 pounds.
Nice.
At a certain point, and that was a big motivator too. Where suddenly I was like, I gotta get my shit together, and it's like anything. Like no one will tell you you can't. No one will. You're never gonna quit smoking from people telling you to stop smoking.
Yeah.
It has to come from within.
Exactly.
So,
you've got to decide that you're ready to start smoking.
Once I realized that I had
Stop
to
smoking.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I realized that I was now in charge of pursuing my own opportunities, there was like this weird switch that flipped while I was working. And
what were you doing for work at that
bank? I worked at a bank, and then I realized, any job. I got really good at the jobs I was given. I started working at this bank, and I was just like one of the, head teller, of the year. I would win awards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I just I'm one of those guys. You put me to mop a floor, I'm gonna mop that. It's gonna be the cleanest fucking floor you've ever seen. Yeah. And that became a real weird. I don't know where that came from, but suddenly it became a pride in what I do, reflected on me. You know what I mean? Suddenly I was like, oh, now I can be proud of my things, and then work became a real motivator.
Yeah. This sounds a lot like a mentality you get from that you might develop from having a good foundation in your athletic career. I don't know how long you played, but that sounds like the discipline of someone who's also going to be what you said you played offense and defense when you played football?
Yeah, I was a center. I was long snap. I was the center for offense. I was,
I don't know anything about football.
I would snap the ball to the quarterback. Okay. I was the guy that gives the ball to the quarterback on offense. And then like for punt and field goals, when they kick the ball, where they snap it way far back and they throw it, I would do that. That was actually the thing I was best at. And
so
then
you've got to snap the ball, and then you also have a guy trying to get by you. So you've got to snap the ball and then stop him.
Yeah. So, and then then let's say we would have to turn over the ball on downs. I wouldn't even leave the field. I would just get on the same side, on the other side of the ball, and just be like on defense. Now it's my turn to kill them.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah. There were times where I was like, man, we sucked. We were terrible because we just didn't have the bodies, And there were times where they would have to call, so on the kickoff team, they'd kick the ball off and I'd be on the team. I'd be on the field. They receive it. Now I'm on defense. I'm on the field. We stop them. They turn over on downs. I'm on the field.
Yeah.
We got to punt it away. I'm on the field. I'm on the field. So literally, there was a time where the coaches were like, I was messing up at something, and they were like, "Oh man, did we teach him that? Oh fuck, timeout." They would have to call a timeout so that I would come off the field, so they could go on there and they're like, "Mike, go this way instead of this way." Okay. Right. And then I'm like, all right, that's it. But literally, I wouldn't come off the field until halftime. Or whenever there was some sort of water break or anything like that. It's Florida. Like 90 degrees. And like we'd be playing in August.
And the pads and the helmet. And
it's terrible. But I guess I was, thinking back on it, I was one of the guys that was the most driven on the team because I was always I was the first one out there.
Yeah.
What it really stems from? I guess just that part of belonging, that wanting to belong. Because I find a thing that makes that I enjoy. Even now, wow, it's kind of revelatory. where like anything I get into, I get really into.
I'm kind of.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm kind of the same way. That's why like I'm only into like maybe like 5 or 6 things, but I know everything about, as much as I can about those 5 or 6 things, and it's odd things too. It's like it's
for me, it's more about
comedy.
the doing of things.
Yeah.
Like so when I was in the
Can just real quick while you were doing that, I was those like those army commercials where they like show like a guy as a firefighter and it's like, oh man, being a firefighter, sorry, and then cuts to him in a battlefield somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, I know about jobs being hard. So I'm imagining you like going between back and forth on different sides of a football team, and then cutting to you like incubating some. Just like getting like a breathing tube, jamming it down.
Intubating,
yeah, or like oh man, we gotta clear his airway, and you just like improvise like a knife, and then you clear his airway by like you.
Oh, there's tons of like MacGyver shit. Yeah, that's
just
really,
MacGyver, just like
you know what? I guess it's so in the process of trying to belong to as many groups. Like if this was years, I had really low self-esteem in high school. I was not like. I was friends with everybody, I was friendly with as many people as I could be because it was such a small school. I had a graduating class of 46 people. It was that tiny a school. It's
really tiny a school.
Excuse me. So like you knew everybody and I was friendly with everybody, but that's kind of, I guess where me now comes from, where everybody's like, everyone's a buddy. Hey buddy, like, hey, we're all in this together. So even though all the people in the school were very different, I was bullied in high school by people because I was just so non-confrontational, except when I played football, and that was like a big thing. And I did martial arts too for a while. I trained martial arts, and that was a weird thing also, in terms of being aggressive. Like I'm not passive aggressive. I'm aggressively passive. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, hey, chill, and then I rip somebody's arm off, and then I'm like, all right, see, you shouldn't have. Why do we do this? Yeah.
Exactly.
We could have done this so much nicer.
You're shaking their hand, and it's not attached.
Yeah. But I would say I'm aggressively passive, where I'm always, and that's a paramedic thing, the de-escalation.
Oh yeah.
When people freak out about stuff, I'm always like, hey, coming from that world also gives you a much broader scope in terms of what is a tragedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it gets you a lot of perspective.
They gave me soy instead of almond at the Starbucks. This is fucking the worst.
Right. It's like, oh man, I haven't done night train yet. Well, I know a guy who was run over by a night train.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Or like we got a call one time that basically was just to scoop up parts. You know what I mean? Shit like that, where you're like, ugh. And so like if nobody, it really does help. It helped solidify in my mind the kind of person I want to be also. Like I could tell you the most formative years of my life were playing football in high school, which I look back on now differently. Being finding that time when I was losing weight, like and really kind of getting control of that, and then being the years I was in the fire academy and becoming a paramedic. Yeah, and they all kind of the running thread through all of those things was that I was learning how I interact with the world around me. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like playing football, it was how to be part of a team. Yeah. How everybody plays their part. You just do your job. Everybody, you do the best. Eyes forward. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. That. Like we're all together in this. And then in the losing weight thing, it was like how the world sees you. You can't exclude that. You know what I mean? Yeah. If like the dress for the job you want to have, you walk around looking like a slob all day. People are like, that guy's a slob. They may not know anything else about you other than that. So you have to kind of realize your appearances in the world. Not to the point that you should define yourself by your appearance, but you can't exclude it. And then being a paramedic gives you that broader scope in that I interact with the world where the dark spots, where not even in the criminal sense, but in that life and death sense, where people faced with mortality. Where, man, I've been in the room many times when, like, someone finds out that they have cancer or whatever, or they're having a heart attack. The look on someone's face when they find out they're having a heart attack, like that's what it is I've seen that many times, and it's part of the deal. So it affects you later. It affects how you interact with the world around you. So if I bomb, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's the temporary discomfort of a group of people not laughing at your jokes does not outweigh the...
It still sucks. But
no, yeah, I know
it's still
too.
fucking awful. But it's not as... But it's in terms of long-lasting effect. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? In that moment, everybody feels what they feel. You can't control it. But then it's how that tiny percentage of your life, time-wise, echoes, like the ripple effect of it. You know, like when you're a kid... Your first girlfriend breaks up with you, and it's, oh my God, the biggest fucking deal. Because
that's what it was for me. I was like, oh my God, nothing will ever hurt this much.
Nothing will.
Everything will hurt more.
Yeah, or even to a certain, and depending on your perspective, nothing will ever hurt that much. Mm-hmm. Isn't that great? You know what I mean? Like like when my brother was in high school, the next in line from me. Yeah. He was in high school, and he was talking about this girl. He was like, this girl, man, she's great, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And in my mind, I'm just like, well, yeah, just go say hi. And I'm like, well, that's the hardest part. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, that's the hardest part. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the hardest part. The rest of it will not be as hard as saying hello. So once you get that out of the way, the rest of it's less difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but I mean, it's less difficult. Or have some perspective in that maybe you don't, what you like about this girl is that you don't know her. Maybe you don't want to ruin that fantasy of you talk to her and then you find out, she's a piece of shit. And then you're like, oh, well.
Right. It's like, oh, she's racist.
Yeah. Or what happens, again, where it affects me negatively, this whole lifestyle, this whole thing. Like after my engagement ended here in New York, I moved to New York thinking I would never have to date here. Uh-huh. Imagine, forget about going from offense to defense. I had to go from being married in my mind. I was like, I'm going to be with this person forever. And I was really on board. It was not in my mind to break up until it just became too much. And then suddenly I'm single. In New York, a place I'm not familiar with. Also, I'm broke.
And you're living in Jamaica?
And I'm living in Jamaica, Queens. So it's like all of these things hit me at once where I'm like, oh man, how the fuck do I do this? Uh-huh. And then so it became a real big problem where now I would go out with girls and then it's very easy to be. So we're both storytellers. Yeah. And I really do want to learn. I'm a listener. I want to learn what people have, their stories to tell. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing: a lot of people. And I will only say women because I only date women. A lot of women my age in New York City are fucking boring. It was really difficult because I had to turn that part of not everyone lives the life I live.
Right. Especially someone who's scooped up parts.
Yeah. Or not even that, like someone who picked up and moved to pursue an art, pursue in a creative field that's, touch and go with money and all these things. It's a very dramatic lifestyle in the telling of it. In the day to day, it's like Netflix and popcorn and open mics and beer and shit. Yeah. But in the glamorized, romanticized version of it, it can be very exciting, and I know how to tell that story. You know what I mean? Like you learn how to tell that story to your parents and whatnot. Right. But on a date where it's like, okay, this is boring. This is boring. Yeah. All right, okay. I mean, and then there's certain people that catch your attention. I've dated people since then, but a lot of people think that they're more exciting than they are. Yeah. In general, like comics, like when I was telling you have to live a life like what that Pete Holmes thing. You live a life worth talking about. No one's going to laugh at a joke about an open mic. Right. You're you're really limiting your audience. It'll no real audience. There's plenty of comics that'll laugh at the experience because it's a shared experience, but you get someone in a crowd from Wisconsin who's here on vacation with their kid and they just want to see something. They're not going to know what the fuck you're talking about. They're not going to relate. So the more you, again, because I do tell stories, my style of comedy is to bring people in to this world that I create. Yeah. So that I can then guide them and point out different weirdnesses inside. So we're all looking around. Like, I'm not throwing stuff at them. We're inside, like it's the fucking Floyd laser light show. we're all in the dome and we're all looking up at it, stuff, and I'm just
Right.
pointing things out.
Sure.
So, but I got to build the dome first. So that's how I think about it. And you know, and that's kind of how you got to be careful. That stuff seeps into your dating life, and you start it becomes like routine, and you don't want to just give the boilerplate answers. You don't want to just tell the boilerplate story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you want to
wanna
actually
keep it-
be a person,
Yeah, exactly.
not some sort of sociopath where you have like a script, like when you ever done sales? You ever done like telemarketing?
Yes, I have.
Where they have like the Rolodex, or not now it's like online, but like there's like a if this then say this, if they say this then say that. There's like a whole script.
Yeah.
They could write like I would love to write one of those out for like Tinder, like a Tinder date. Or like if they say this then say this. Oh, you have a child. Great. You know, like and then whatever the response would be.
Yeah. Yeah, especially Tinder. That's the users of that site. I think are people that like don't know like the bit. And granted, you hear all the horror stories, and I imagine the horror stories.
How long have you been in your relationship?
A little over 2 years.
Great, yeah, that's fantastic. But like, you get a little bit more of it because you go to these comedy shows and you hear other people talking about it. But also, comedians are fucking weirdos. So they're not like a good gauge of what anything is.
Exactly.
You know, for the
I agree with you completely. Like we're not having the normal human experience.
No. We're all sociopaths. We're all in it for the joke, not for the love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least a lot of the joke is. Man, I saw someone post something online where they were interacting with someone on Tinder, which I am a big opponent. I am opposed to the screenshot culture.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't fucking stand it.
No,
where
I
it's
can't
like, that
either.
was a private conversation, and also you don't know the tone in which I said anything. And then to go post it where I don't have, it's like taking someone to court and having the defendant not there. Charging someone with a crime and not letting him come into the courtroom and hear the charge and hear the case.
I agree.
You know what I mean? I hate that sort of like one-sided gossip that essentially it is. And so this guy was talking to this girl, and she was giving a genuine answer, and it was like a genuine kind of like it begged a question. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean by that? And then he just made a joke and just kind of burned that whole conversation for the joke. And I'm like, you could have if you were really interested, you could have asked her to clarify or just continue the conversation rather than just be a piece of shit about it.
Yeah, you could have had a genuine human.
You could have been. You could have been a genuine human.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about having the moment. It's about you are that person in that moment. You know what I mean? Like everybody's capable of being a shitty person. In that moment, you are a shitty person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You are your actions. So it's like I'm a firm believer of the being in the present. You know, like. One of the things that really kind of motivated me in terms of my mental health when I moved up here and I was newly single and all these things, there was something that I read where it was like, remove the word should from your vocabulary, because what that does is, I took the super nerdy approach. My interpretation of it was that it creates like a parallel timeline,
right,
that you can never get to. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
but
like,
then you might think about the alternative timeline
but then you start,
because that's something I would do is like, what's the other timeline?
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If it goes two ways, because should you use for yourself and for others. It's two different things. So like let's say I did something and I look back and I'm like, oh man, I should have done that. I should have done something different. Now you're looking back at the past. You're creating a moment where you took a different path.
Yeah.
Now you've branched off the timeline. Like in Back to the Future 2, when they start showing the Biff timeline, you created the Biff timeline with that word should immediately. Now, the further you go down that timeline, in this world that you can never get to, there's no DeLorean, you can't get there, then you're building up all of these negative energy, emotion, because you can't get there. It becomes this kind of unrequited love or some sort of like, you just out of reach. Grass is always greener. The good is over there, so that means this is bad. And that's just putting you're exhausting so much of this emotional energy on the impossible.
Yeah.
Then for the other way around, so like you made that choice. All right, that's the choice you made. Now you go in the future, you would use that information and say, I'm going to. et cetera, et cetera. Not I should have. Because you'll never be presented with the same options again, nor will anyone else that you expect something from. So like if someone does something and you're like, oh, they should have done this other thing. Well, now you've done the same. You created another timeline where they did that thing.
Yeah.
And now you're holding them to a standard that you have no reason, no business holding them to. It's a fictional world you just created.
Yeah.
And that becomes a weird kind of exhausting practice mentally if you keep doing that. Like if you get stuck in that cycle, you're tired a lot.
Yeah.
It drove me nuts where it's like, oh, look, because breaking off an engagement, that's a big deal. So that's a big should. What should I have done? So I bounced around a lot then. And once I took it away, I'm like, well, I can't do anything about it now, can I? I can in the future seek to reconcile, but that won't erase what I did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, well, that's not the point. So now you are here. So you can only control this moment. So I have a thing of picking directions as opposed to destinations.
Yeah.
I collect a lot of phrases. I collect a lot of like little like E equals MC squared, but for like life, you know? So pick a direction, not a destination. Because if I'm moving a direction, I win.
Yeah.
And if something needs to be changed, I can always change direction. If I pick a goal like destination, like if I get there, that means success. Well, you're never going to land exactly there. Anywhere but that little spot would be considered failure. As opposed to if you're just moving along a path, you're like, oh, well, this direction is the right thing. I'm moving, you know? All that sort of thing is I collect a ton of those phrases.
Well, that's good because as continued movement can probably never be a bad thing. Stasis is,
and there's no such thing as moving back. Time doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You know.
No, so you're either at stasis where you're just kind of ruminating, or you're trying to actively pick your next direction.
Yeah, or like even if you're standing still, you're moving at a pace that you are no longer determining. You know what I mean? Like it's a stagnant pace, but time is still going. So everyone it's like those walkways at the airport.
Yeah.
You're standing, like you may be on that walkway, but everyone else who's walking down the path is moving way faster than you, and you're like, hey, why the fuck are they going so fast? Oh, they're walking, moving, and so you're still moving through time at the regular speed, but you're not really using it to get anywhere, Eventually, you run out of walkway, and like when you see as many walkways end as I have. Which I tried to make a joke, man. I tried to make it funny because I think it's interesting how many people I've seen die. And nobody sees that anymore.
Yeah.
It may not be funny. It's probably just interesting or something, some sort of poignant example of like people don't die at home anymore. They die in the hospital. So hospitals are no longer a place of healing. It's a place of death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's not... Everyone is in denial. Like if more people saw death, there'd probably be a lot less people dicking around. You know what I mean? Like if you saw what happens at the end more. Yeah. I think everyone should volunteer at a hospital in high school. The idea of a candy striper or the idea of all that, I firmly believe, get your first responder, get medical. Also, a lot of people don't know how their fucking body works. So many people have no idea how quote unquote health works. But like if people knew more about life and death, learn about babies, learn about the geriatrics, learn about death, there would be a lot less people complaining about bullshit or not choosing something between one or the other. You learn, well, I got to make a choice. All right, here we go. This.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that was the wrong choice, make another choice. You know what I mean? Like there would be a little bit more initiative to get to fucking move, I
agree. I am on board with that. That reminded me of something I saw in the movie Into the Abyss. It's a Werner Herzog documentary.
Is that the one with the bear?
No, that's Grizzly Man.
Oh, Grizzly Man.
This is about a guy on death row, and it features the guy whose job is to pull the switch on the lethal injection chemicals, and how it really fucked with him.
Yeah.
After a while,
I can imagine that would be.
Yeah, and at the end,
fuck.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end, he's just kind of sort of talking about, like all the graves, and it's like year you're born, the year you die on it, and then there's this dash in the middle, and that's your entire life. And he starts talking about just living your dash.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me.
Because that's all you got. You know, you don't control, unless you take your own life, you don't control the end number, the end date. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But what you can do is control what goes on in the middle.
The dash is all you got. And the more shoulds you have in there, the less of your dash you're actually controlling. You're creating alternate dashes that are never going to exist. You know what I mean? You're creating that concept to me is very important in terms of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, the people who have quote unquote regrets, you know?
Yeah.
That's the shoulds. You know, those are those alternate timelines, you know, like filter out all of the timelines that you can't get to.
Right.
You're on the one that you have like you're here, you know, like
Yeah.
but it's you know, just big picture stuff that you get from I don't have the average, you know, like life experiences that you know, especially the younger comics that you see starting stand up I started at 15, and I'm like, what did you talk about at 15? And then you hear about it and you're like, how can you talk about that at 15 and expect anybody to believe? Granted, there's plenty of funny points to be made, but you can't be Louis C.K. at 15.
No.
You know what I mean? No one's going to give a fuck what you have to say about anything at 15.
Yeah.
You could do the exact same bit. You could have created it, the whole bit about it. Give it a minute. It's going up to space. That concept alone is funny, but the story around it, people would have been like, fuck you.
Yeah, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're 15.
You're 15. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Whereas you, I think, have earned just on the incredible life you've led, and also the perspective that you have and the kind of shit you've been through. I
don't think
you
of
have
it
the
as
ability.
incredible. I think because I know plenty of guys who are in that same vein as me. You know, who are, anybody who has sought out a medical career, especially emergency medicine, will have a different perspective on life.
Yeah.
Because you see, you know what I mean? Like one of my jokes is one of the setups, because you have to ease people into the whole paramedic thing.
And I wanted to talk to you about this a little bit, and just a little bit of shop talk before we end here. The kind of the style of comedy you do, because first of all, this has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, thanks, man. This has been really fun.
Yeah,
some revelatory things for me that I've like, oh wow, I didn't even realize that.
Well, then that's
this is great.
That's great.
Yeah, perfect.
So, man, fucking A, man. So this is kind of and before you get in what you're about to say, this sort of stories that you tell, and also I'd love to know about when you do long form stuff in like a comedy club, and introducing this, what some people would call heavy subject matter. How do you get into it, and what do you find has made it most successful when you're doing it?
It depends on how long the set is. If I have more time, then I can do some of the darker stuff, but I can't do, or if it's a storytelling show. If it's a storytelling show where people are expecting some sort of, not a boxing speed bag of jokes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are expecting it to flow a little bit. You can build a bit, because it's all about tension and
release.
And then release. And some of that tension can be negative too, but not at a straight stand-up show. At a storytelling show, you can have some of that negative stuff and have people think a little bit, and it's more about engaging the crowd. That's my big thing is I engage the crowd.
Yeah.
I can't do my jokes without them.
Right.
I can't do my stories without them. I can't do my material without them. So I need them to be listening. So I look at the crowd. There's like, you see comics, they just stare up at the back of the room, or like they're rehearsing they're just kind of delivering it.
Sure.
Or not even delivering, they're just saying their material. Lucas Connolly, when I was struggling here, I was having like a down moment of like, I'm not writing anything, I'm not creative. He said, perform your material. That's always what I did, but he's like, you're not doing that anymore. Perform your material.
Yeah.
Don't fit into whatever mold you think New York comedy is supposed to be. Perform your material. And that perform part really got me, where I was like, yeah, it's a performance. You know, you're the show.
Exactly.
And then once I got that, then it became a very simple process of what do they want to hear? They breathes. You know, the audience breathes with you.
Exactly.
So you can't So I do the bit about the lady who was a Las Vegas showgirl, and
yeah, that's a great story.
when I do that story at a storytelling show, I add the darker elements because people are more willing to listen. At a straight stand-up show, it's bing, bang, boom, bam, bam, bam. You know, it's like bop, 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 beat, 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 punch, tag, tag, beat, punch, tag. You know, like it's more efficient.
Exactly, because the expectations are
the
different.
story for me personally feels better when it has all of the elements because I know the whole story.
Yeah.
The stand-up crowd that I'm telling it to for the first time doesn't know the story, so they're not missing anything. So hey, it's great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like. One of the ways I approach it is like, when you tell someone you're a paramedic, they forget that that's a job until they need it. You know.
Yeah.
They're like, that's why, like, when you see people on Facebook, they're like, who fixes iPhone screens? You know what I mean? You don't think about it until your fucking screen's broken.
Yeah.
Like that, but with your body. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think about it until later. So it becomes it's like a weird parallel dimension that you live in.
Yeah.
And I don't get into it too deeply on stage because it is dark. You know, I tried to make that thing funny where it's like, you know, I've seen a lot of people die. I was trying to find like, why is that funny to me, but I can't figure out how to make it funny for other people, so it's not in the act anymore. I can't do it.
Right.
I haven't figured it out yet, nor will I force it.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the audience is an individual. I'm smarter than an individual in that crowd, but the audience as a whole is smarter than me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
because they'll tell you what's going to work in that moment. I almost think, and
there's plenty of funny stuff that happens. You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And 5 years from now, you could know exactly how watching people die is hilarious to everybody.
Who knows? Who knows what that would be like? Where in my mind, I can picture. It's like the you know how the scientists, they can tell you what would happen at the end, but they don't know what happens in the middle of an experiment. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That I can picture the end result where that's funny. That's why I'm trying to figure out what process of chemistry has to happen for that to be funny, because I know there's parts of it that are. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck, why, you know, how do I discover that? So it's that weird. There's a lot more science in this art than people realize.
I think so.
Of psychology.
Oh, absolutely.
I read a lot of psychology blogs, and one of the things that I read, like a hostage negotiator, like the top 7 tips for swaying someone to your opinion, and it was written by an FBI hostage negotiator.
Oh wow.
And it changed the way I tell one of my jokes, just like the order in which I do something.
Yeah. Because
I was like, oh fuck, that makes sense. It changed one of my jokes.
How do you mind if I ask you what that was? What made you change?
There was a part of the joke where I thought it was the punchline, and it was about showing. Oh man, I don't know if I can do the whole thing, but it's basically like you can't punch. So if you want people on your side about saying something controversial, you would have to give them you have to kind of not give them a way out, but it has to look like the only path.
Yeah.
Even though it has to look like there are multiple paths, but really that's the only one.
And that's your opinion on the controversial subject.
On my opinion on the subject, on the controversial subject. Because, so like I had to do, oh man, yeah. So the joke is about how I'm a bigger dude and I get set up by like my friends. Like I work in the hospital, you work with a lot of females, you know, a lot of women. My female friends would set me up with their friends, and I'm a big dude, and they just like would put me in they would like try to set me up with someone in my own weight class, like we're boxing. Right.
Yeah. I've heard you tell this joke.
Yeah. And then so the way, like certain people would get really sensitive about, and I tell it differently a little bit now because I'm still I always try to figure it out how it's going to work for that particular crowd. But in that, trying to say like that's not what I'm into. Like I had to throw in the whole thing of find out what I'm into first before you just start telling me I have to date this person, you know, like,
yeah. And
there was that concept of like, we're all into different things. And I had to include the option for them to be like, well, yeah, we're all into what we're into, rather than just be like, this is why this is dumb. This is dumb. This is dumb. I had to find a way to soften my opinion because people get really sensitive about body issues and whatever quote unquote body shaming is.
Right.
In the joke. And then I would have to, and then so it's part of a longer set. There's a whole other joke that it's a callback, that there's a callback to it in that joke. So now I only do it when it's together, because I need to give people the illusion that there's another opinion, but not for this joke. For this joke, you're on board with me,
Yeah.
And that comes from like you have to build that dome, the dome of the laser light show.
Yeah, absolutely.
The planetarium. I gotta give you the stars to look at, so that we're all on the same page. Like here, over here, but it's still me, still my dome.
Yeah.
I don't know if that analogy makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me, because in a way, if we're going with the planetarium analogy, you're creating, like what you were talking about, you're creating your own universe.
Right. Yeah.
And the reality that exists within that universe.
And if I don't soften that opinion before that, they're not in there with me.
Exactly.
They're hanging outside the planetarium. They're not watching the same show as everyone else.
Exactly. Because
it won't hit.
Yes, and I think some comics take too much of the angle of, this is my opinion, it is right, and you are an idiot if you think anything differently, and I'm going to tell you all the reasons that you're an idiot. Now, people might hear that from outside the planetarium, like, that sounds like it's pretty aggro planetarium.
Yeah.
I like the...
Yeah, well, I just want some of
the planetarium that leads my interpretation.
Or like...
They're going to give you a really strong case for, hey, here's...
I think of it as a dome more than like, one of my favorite things is to go when they do the outdoor movies.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love those.
I love this. And I would go to like Bryant Park, and they were showing... I got to watch Spaceballs on the deck of the USS Intrepid. That was dope as fuck. Nice. But in the neighbors in that area, they don't want to watch Rocky or whatever movie's showing, but it's there. It's in their face. They're not in the... So I say it's a dome because it's enclosed. It's my bubble. It's mine.
Yeah.
It's only mine. Like if you're inside, that means that you're willing to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
I'm not forcing anything on you. I'm not one of these guys that wants to like those clipboard survey people that just grab you on the street and be like, I'm not one of those comics that wants to antagonize the audience, because I want them. That's just not my style. There's plenty of people who do it and do it well, but that's not my thing. I want everyone in my. I guess it all comes back to wanting to be a part of a group.
Yes.
Just kind of bring it all together. Hey, everybody. Here are my thoughts. If you're on board, here's why I think you should be on board with what I'm about to say later, because they don't know what's coming. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you have the ability to kind of be the puppet master of the audience. When it's good, you're like a conductor of an orchestra. Like you're telling them when they are laughing.
Yes.
This is funny, and you're laughing because it's funny. Mm-hmm. That's when it's the best. When you got them rolling. But you have to, in my opinion, my comedy works best once they're engaged, and it's almost like an op-ed. Like I've swayed them to my opinion, and that to me is important. But sometimes it's an illusion. Sometimes it's like they think that, oh yeah, he's got a point, when really the way I set it up, now they're on board. It's setting up another thing later.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a combination of, it's a combination of like psychology and verbal wizardry and magic.
There's psychology
that comes from being a little bit of a sociopath.
It comes from, 100%. It's hard. That's why I was saying like the whole dating thing. It's hard not to fall into these weird, scripted responses rather than connect with human emotion, because that's easier. You know what I mean? It's easier to learn the play than to improvise the play.
Absolutely.
So, you know what I mean? And get the results, like I'm not going to end up with Hamlet.
Right.
If I just start freewheeling it, I got to learn the script. It's easier to do Hamlet when you have the script.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when, you're interacting socially, like my positivity is a choice. I'm not always upbeat. Sometimes I'm going to tell you to fuck off or whatever,
sure.
As in like every other person. And it just becomes a matter of the choices that you make, because everything's a choice. Mm-hmm. The only thing you can't control, again, is your health, and which a big part of it you can. But some people, you just get sick. You get sick, and the things that you can control I guess my unified theory of comedy is that you can control the content and the method of your message, but you can't control how it's received.
Yeah.
So all the work that you do is not in the reception of the content. Like that's up to them. And this goes for conversation. This goes for when you're for any method of communication. I can control what comes out of my mouth, and I can control how it comes out.
Yes.
But that's it. That's where it ends. You know, that's where all of your work has to be. And so you choose what comes out of your mouth. You have to be conscious of it. And if you get rid of all the shoulds and all the alternate timelines, you're more conscious. You're more present. It's to be in control of what you're saying right here, right now. You know, it all kind of circles back. You know, it ties together.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's fucking...
And then I've started a religion where the books you can buy, and I'm going to become tax exempt. And if you're all become some, what's a good name for people who would follow me? Disciple? No, not disciples.
Let's see, Mike Mercadal, the Mercs.
The Mercs. Oh yeah, now we're just gunning. Now we're just like the A team.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm starting my own A team, everybody.
I'll paint the van.
Yeah.
Need a bitch van.
Yeah.
Dude, this was amazing.
This is great, man. It's so much fun. I didn't realize. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
I didn't realize we're getting so deep.
No, dude, I love this kind of shit.
Me too, man.
Dude, because it helps me, and if it has any other kind of impact for anyone who might hear it, then that's what I'm trying to do.
I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope I didn't come across like some sort of like lunatic.
No, dude.
These are the thoughts that you rarely say out loud, though. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
I
absolutely.
have so much inner monologue that I'm hearing it out loud, and I'm like, I might be nuts.
Well,
you know?
I love to hear people's inner monologues, and this is either going to be inspirational to a bunch of people, or it's going to be the thing they play on the news.
Yeah.
When shit goes wrong.
This will be the thing that Kim Kardashian releases about me. You know,
right.
like where it's like, look, the truth of this guy is this.
Exactly. Well, I'll be your Kim Kardashian.
Hell yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Will. Thank you.
Like I said, Mike is a hell of a thinker, and I got a lot out of talking to him, so I hope that you enjoyed that as well. If you want to check out my website or follow me on Twitter, my handle is @comicwillcarey. You can also check out my website, willcareyisfunny.com, for links to my upcoming stand-up dates. You can also like Facebook, on Facebook, the show Between Awesome Disaster. It's @AwesomeDisasterPod. And you can subscribe on iTunes, leave a comment, leave a review or rating. It's greatly appreciated. And I appreciate you guys tuning in every week. And I'll see you next week between Awesome and Disaster.